Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ConnectedLearning.tv weekly webinar. This is our 18th in our series, and you can find out a lot more about the weekly webinars at www.connectedlearning.tv. Today, we are privileged and excited to have Andrew Slack and some other great guests discussing insights from the civic engagement and youth work of the Harry Potter Alliance. If you're on live stream, we'd love for you to use the chat there to connect with one another. And also to, if you have questions or comments, we'll do our best to scoop those into the Google Hangout with Andrew and the rest of the guests. There also is a public Google Doc that should be, the link should be in the live stream chat. And we would love it if you would help us take notes and highlights from today's session, and that'll be archived and shared widely afterwards. Before we get to Andrew and give him the floor, I wanted to give the guests in our Hangout just a second to introduce themselves briefly and sort of describe their connection and interest in the work. Mimi?
Hi, thanks, Jeff. So I'm really delighted to be here. I'm Mimi Ito. I'm Research Director for the Digital Media and Learning Hub at UC Irvine. And as somebody who's studied fan culture for a long time and thought it's been a great site for encouraging kids' learning and engagement and sense of civic participation, I've been a huge fan of Andrew's work at HPA. So we're really delighted to have him here to talk to us about the links between what HPA is doing and connected learning. And I've also been collaborating with folks like Netta, who's on the Hangout with us as well, and Henry Jenkins and Sangeeta in the Civic Paths project at USC. And I'm sure Netta will talk more about that.
Thanks, Mimi. Lauren?
Hi, I'm Lauren Bird, and I work for the Harry Potter Alliance as the creative media coordinator, and I'm also one of our weekly video bloggers. And I'm also a recent graduate from NYU, where I studied comparative literature and documentary filmmaking.
Thank you, Lauren. Netta?
Hi, I'm Netta Kligler-Vilenchik. I'm a graduate student at USC, working with Henry Jenkins. And I'm also part of the MacArthur Network on Youth and Participatory Politics, working with Henry and Mimi. And as part of that MacArthur Network, I'm looking at, for my thesis, at several case studies of relationships between fandom and civic and political engagement, including Nerdfighters and the Harry Potter Alliance and the Imagine Better project. And so I've been working with the Harry Potter Alliance for a while on this research. I'm very excited by it. And that's it for me.
Yeah, thank you, Netta. And thank all of you for taking the time to be here. Andrew is a lot of things. He's a teacher and a social organizer and a human rights activist, a comedian, an actor, and a writer. He spent years performing sketch comedy for hundreds of colleges across the United States, but stopped touring so that he could devote himself full-time to the Harry Potter Alliance, which he co-founded in 2005. A Phi Beta Kappa graduate of Brandeis University, Andrew is dedicated to learning and extrapolating how modern myth, new media, and expressive therapy can transform our lives, both personally and collectively. So Andrew, the floor is yours.
Wow, thank you. That's I am completely honored to be here, and I have been a big fan of Mimi Ito's work and all of your work at Connected Learning for some time. So it is a real honor to be here, and to be here with Netta and Lauren, and everyone here on the live stream. And I will be trying to read the live stream as well. We do have some members I'm seeing here in the chat from the Harry Potter Alliance, so I'm really excited to see you all and to hear from you and from others across the world regarding our work and the model that we're building together, which I think is very congruent and makes a lot of sense going with the Harry Potter Alliance. So I'm really excited to answer any questions and to also explore questions together, because that essentially is what we are doing in building a movement around using stories to change the story of the world. So with that said, I'd like you to think about a story, if you will, a story that has moved you. It doesn't have to be Harry Potter. It could be any story or book that has moved you, and just to think for a moment about what would happen if you joined people who, by the way, if you hear screaming, my brother is downstairs playing with his twin 3-year-old boy and girl. And I think he's downstairs wrestling with them. So that's really funny. I am not at home right now. I'm in the middle of traveling, so I'm staying with him. So but back to story. To speak to being 3 just for a moment. I have been in love with stories since I was 3. And The Wizard of Oz was the thing that introduced me to loving stories. And when I got reconnected to that love was when I picked up Harry Potter. So to go back to this question of a story that has moved you, what would happen if you worked with other people to turn that message into something that changed the world? What we have done with the Harry Potter Alliance is something that I call an example of cultural acupuncture. And in cultural acupuncture as a model has the potential to be a game changer for humanity. Now, I know that many people in here in this chat who are listening from everywhere have read Harry Potter. For those of you who have not read Harry Potter, just to let you know, Harry Potter happens to be a very popular book series, which obviously you know. Even if you haven't read it, and even if you don't like it, we can all acknowledge that Harry Potter has gotten people to read. It's the most well-sold piece of fiction in the history of literature. It's in sheer numbers. It's cut across cultures. Besides the Quran, it's the most requested book in Guantanamo Bay, and it's created a culture of fans that grew up with Harry. So this whole culture of fandom within the Harry Potter Alliance has done everything from writing fan fiction to starting sports leagues based off the sport in the wizarding world, Quidditch, to creating a whole genre of music called Wizard Rock with hundreds of bands singing about Harry Potter. And when this all started, you know, I looked around at all of this, and I thought it sounded pretty silly. You know, we're looking at a boy with a lightning-shaped scar who goes to wizarding school, but I just graduated from college, and I did believe that stories could change the world. That was a huge part of my education, and then I was supplementing my income by doing teaching while trying to be a professional comedian with a comedy group. And the way my students lit up when they talked about Harry Potter, I had to finally try it. So I picked up the book, and I had this feeling go through me that I could barely explain, and I was just gone. Harry Potter took me to another world. It took me right back to being 3 years old with my mom, running around our house where I was imitating the witch, the Wicked Witch of the West and the Wizard of Oz, and it took me to this world of house elves and Christmas trees, this power of love just flowing through me. Harry's school, Hogwarts, opened up a world of freedom for me, a world of childlike wonder, and I just could not put the book down. Every moment became a moment to read Harry Potter. In fact, at the time, I had a girlfriend, and when she went to sleep, I was incredibly excited because it gave me the opportunity to read Harry Potter. Lines at the post office were incredibly exciting because they gave me the chance to read Harry Potter. And everywhere I went, I had the opportunity to talk about Harry Potter with someone because the whole world at that point was reading Harry Potter. But I also grew frustrated. If Harry Potter were in our world, he would do more than talk about Harry Potter. And so I was wondering this question as I was looking at all these websites and all these different Wizard Rock bands and all these different places. What if we could ask this question that if Harry were in our world, wouldn't he do more than simply talk about Harry Potter? Wouldn't he fight for justice the way he does in the books? In fact, in the books, he starts a student activist group called Dumbledore's Army, which wakes the world up to the villain's return, Voldemort returning to power every day and getting a little stronger every day. What if we could take the entire Harry Potter fan community and turn it into a Dumbledore's Army for our world? That was the fundamental question. And I became obsessed with this question of turning fandom into a place to embody the message of the heroes that we love. And then this question, most people perceive as pretty crazy, but then I met Harry and the Potters. Harry and the Potters are a Wizard Rock band. They are the first Wizard Rock band. They are 2 brothers who look like Harry Potter, dress like Harry Potter, and sing songs from Harry's perspective. They sing punk rock songs from Harry Potter's perspective, and they love this idea for a Dumbledore's Army for the world because it was crazy. And they would take what I would write. I would write up an action alert where I'd connect something in our world to Harry Potter, and they would. There are so many parallels in these books. J.K. Rowling used to work for Amnesty International. The social parallels are already there, and they would take those parallels, and then they would. I would take those parallels, put it in an action alert, and Harry and the Potters reposted it back on a website called MySpace back in 2006, and within 3 minutes, we were an international organization. Within 3 minutes, we were hearing from people, young people all over the world, that were saying this is what they've always dreamed of doing, what they've always dreamed of being a part of is embodying the story they were growing up with, which is Harry Potter. And it was incredibly exciting. And then soon other bands that had been created, inspired by Harry and the Potters, were soon following suit and were reposting all of our action alerts. Bands like the Moaning Myrtles, Draco and the Malfoys, who sing songs like, "My dad is rich and your dad is dead. My dad is rich and your dad is dead." So we had this whole sort of incredible, and by the way, Draco and the Malfoys, they started, they're about the same age as me, I'm 32, as fans of the WWF. So when they saw Harry and the Potters, they wanted to create an enemy band for Harry and the Potters. And so there was all these bands that were sending out these messages, and we were soon reaching over 100,000 Harry Potter fans. Well, the main Harry Potter fan sites caught wind of this, and by 2007, right before the last book was released, they were putting out all the material that we were doing. They were advertising and promoting it. They were promoting our podcasts. We had a podcast on the genocide in Darfur, and we connected it to parallels in the books and to waking the world up to ending genocide the way Dumbledore's army woke the world up to Voldemort's return. And we would partner with an NGO who worked on anti-genocide stuff around that. That particular podcast got downloaded over 120,000 times. Our NGO partner saw a significant spike in participation and engagement, and at that time we ended up getting a lot of media attention too. So that was the beginning, and then at that point we become the sort of community organizer for the entire Harry Potter fandom. We had built the trust and the authenticity, which is essential in fandom, is really being an authentic fan. You can't just talk to fans and say, well, why don't you do this and help the world? I mean, I really was coming from a place of wanting to keep the spirit of Albus Dumbledore alive, which is a core part of the Harry Potter series, particularly after the 6th book. So this was a very big deal for us. And then by December of 2007, J.K. Rowling spoke glowingly about us in Time magazine. It said when asked about the Harry Potter Alliance, the HPA, she practically levitated off the couch. Now this is the sort of god of the universe that I'm living in, and she's levitating, and she created a universe where objects levitate. So that was a pretty exciting and ironic experience, kind of paradoxical. By 2008, we built a staff. Now we have people who are amazing volunteers like Lauren Bird here, about 70 volunteers who clock in over 1,500 hours of volunteer work per week. We have some chapter organizers I see in the chat right now. We have close to 100 chapters all over the world. We have, I feel, become a global Dumbledore's army for our world. We have sent 5 cargo planes to Haiti. We've donated close to 90,000 books across the world, and we've done significant advocacy on human rights, LGBTQ equality, media reform, and always tying these messages back to the books. And in the meantime, we've been covered by about every major publication in the US, and I've had the opportunity to talk in TEDx in Rome and the Nobel Peace Prize Forum this year at South by Southwest. It's been a very exciting thing. But what we're talking about here is something bigger. This concept of fan activism, of taking fandom, this idea that when we're in fandom, we are participating in something original and exciting. We're putting our energy, our time, and our resources. I call that, energy, talent, and resources. I call it ETR, energy, talent, and resources. All of this energy, talent, and resources going into a fandom can then be moved through, and reprocessed and remixed to create a better world. When there's that much ETR, energy, talent, and resources, we can really, really change things. Cultural acupuncture is the metaphoric framework that I discuss around this. And the idea is find where the energy is in the culture, where people are putting that energy, talent, and resources. And you can do the same thing with sports in a lot of regards. And then find an authentic way, and really underline the word authentic, to move that energy authentically to create a healthier body for our world. That is cultural acupuncture, and stories are our proverbial needles. Stories are what resonate. They're what resonated for all of humanity since the beginning of humanity. And unfortunately, a lot of nonprofits get tied down in technocratic details, and we lose a lot of the epic narrative of this very important part of where we are in human history right now. So we're changing that, and we're working with partner groups and NGOs who normally speak in dry language and getting them to be a little playful. So where we're going now is we're working on new projects regarding the Harry Potter Alliance and new campaigns, which I'm excited to talk about, but I'm also excited to talk about the fact that we're seeing this as part of a broader movement of fandom. We're not the only leaders here. There are nerd fighters, which I imagine Netta will be talking about, or others, and we are excited to be partnering with them. We've created something called the Imagine Better Project. The name of that project, Imagine Better, comes from a direct quote from J.K. Rowling's commencement speech in 2008 at Harvard University, where she said, "We do not need magic to transform the world. We carry all the power we need inside of us already. We have the power to imagine better." And I really believe that this is true. This is true in education. This is true in social justice. We are dealing with an economic deficit, of course, and we are dealing with a knowledge deficit when it comes to certain elements of our world. But I think more than anything in our world, we deal with an empathy deficit and an imagination deficit. But we all have empathy and imagination in spades. My 3-year-old niece and nephew who are downstairs playing with my brother, they have tons of empathy and they have tons of imagination, and we need to learn how to tap into what's already there. So the Imagine Better project is an extension of the Harry Potter Alliance. Eventually, it will become an umbrella of the Harry Potter Alliance. For now, it is a project of the Harry Potter Alliance. There are 3 goals: activation, inspiration, and education. Activation, we're building a larger fan network. We started with the Hunger Games. I'd love to talk more about that after I'm done with these opening remarks. And we're working with other fans, fans of Doctor Who and other fandoms, starting with what Harry Potter fans are generally fans of. 2 is inspiration. We're working with academics and activists and nonprofits to really frame the problems of today in epic language of story. It's really important that we think about story and we care about story, and we're doing a lot of advising and consulting regarding that. And then number 3 is education. We really, really want to, and this is where connected learning speaks to my heart, and the digital learning initiative in a way that I can't even begin to explain, is I really think that our current education system is asking all of the wrong questions, and when you ask dysfunctional questions, you will continue to get dysfunctional answers. And that is what we continue to see time and time again in the public policy discussions. And yet the research we're finding here that's been funded by MacArthur, that's been funded by the Knight Foundation and other Pearson and other foundations, is that these are the wrong questions. And so what we're doing with the Imagine Better project, partnering with the Smithsonian Ed Lab and other groups across the country, is to work on a pedagogical system that starts with the books, TV shows, and movies that kids are interested in right now and scaffolding out from there. So once again, a fan activist network inspiring other nonprofits to think this way, as well as focusing on education and looking at this as a revolution in pedagogy that's essential at this critical time in the human narrative. So that is essentially where we're at, and where we've been, and where we're going. And I'm excited to open the floor back up to all of you so we can continue this discussion, because that's what this ultimately is. And this is more than a nonprofit, more than an organization. This is a larger movement that we're all a part of here, just by logging onto the internet and talking about our own personal stories and our own love of stories. So thank you for giving me the floor here. It's an honor to be here with you all, and I'm excited to continue working with you all and talking with everybody here about how we can move forward.
Thanks, Andrew. There's a ton of fans in the likewise back to you with the digital group and the connected learning group. So I wanted to give Mimi, Lauren, and Netta first chance at sort of building off anything Andrew had said, or any questions or comments.
I would love to hear more, Andrew, about how you're thinking with Imagine Better, and sort of, you had mentioned sports fandoms as also a site of opportunity. I mean, I think one of the things that's really exciting about how you're thinking about the work is that you're not restricting it just to Harry Potter. I'm curious if there are, you know, what you see as both the opportunities as well as the challenges of expanding to other fandoms, because I think there was something unique about Harry Potter and both the timeliness of it, the fact that, I mean, and Hunger Games is another, you know, it's a great series in terms of capturing young people's attention right now. So I was just curious to hear you speak a little bit more about, you know, what kinds of fandoms, what kinds of moments seem to work well for movement building, and where you've seen some barriers or challenges to the model expanding.
Should I respond to that first, or should we?
Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really amazing question, and I'm going to try to answer it, but it's more like I have a series of questions more than a series of answers. But that is really, I mean, so, well, let me first talk about Harry Potter for just a moment. Harry Potter changed everything. Although part of what changed everything is just Web 2.0. And Harry Potter was coming out at the same time as Web 2.0. One of our board members, Melissa Anelli, wrote the best-selling book, Harry History. It's a history of the Harry Potter fandom, talks a lot about the interconnected relationship between the Harry Potter fandom and Web 2.0 participatory culture. Is the participatory culture in Web 2.0 was building at the same time as Harry Potter. So we have a huge network that grew up with Harry as the internet was growing up, which makes Harry Potter very extraordinary in that case. In addition, Harry Potter was hogging the top 10 New York Times bestselling list. I mean, there was about 4 or 5 that were just permanently there. And a lot of adult authors were getting really upset because, I mean, they just weren't getting the attention that it was becoming not competitive for them anymore. So the New York Times ended up responding by creating a YA best-selling list. Now that was an unprecedented move because it ended up giving a lot of attention to YA literature that hadn't gotten that kind of credibility before. So it ended up allowing for a lot of new authors who had never been seen before to get quickly on the top 10 or top 100 of a specialized New York Times best-selling list. That gave birth to a whole new industry. So this enthusiasm of Harry Potter, we see the next big wave is Twilight, and we see the next big wave is Hunger Games. A lot of people in the publishing industry, I've heard say, the next big wave is John Green. His success in the last year with The Fault in Our Stars, which has been #1 or #2 on the New York Times best-selling list. He was #1 on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com in terms of pre-ordered books before his publishing agency even announced that the book was coming out. And that's because he has this incredible internet following, which are the Nerdfighters. John is the head of the Nerdfighters with his brother Hank. So he's an internet celebrity as well as a young adult author. And he's writing in a completely different style than Hunger Games and Twilight and Harry Potter. He writes in the style of J.D. Salinger, more like, it's sort of an introspective, angst-ridden, teenage, neurotic, very real-world style. But it's not about the style, it's about the story. And he tells a very good story. And that's what's important here. A lot of people are saying, well, is there going to be a new wave of dystopian literature because of the Hunger Games? No. I mean, yes, there's going to be a lot of copycats, but no, nothing's going to catch on like the Hunger Games unless it's really, really good. So authenticity is key here. So to begin to answer your question here, Mimi, I think if I'm not authentic, if the Harry Potter Alliance is not authentic with what we're doing with Imagine Better, we can't just approach sports fans because I am not a huge sports fan. I would need to be working with sports fans in order to do this. And that's where we're coming into some of the challenges, is how does this remain authentic? But why I'm bringing all this up is that one of the #1 Harry Potter sites, fan sites, is the Leaky Cauldron. Well, they started a news site, which is bigger than the Leaky Cauldron now. It's called Leaky News. And if you go to leakynews.com right now, you'll see that they're covering stuff that's not Harry Potter. They're covering Harry Potter, yes, but they're covering a ton of other things. Now, Leaky News sort of outlines what I think are the migratory patterns of Harry Potter fans. A lot of John Green readers, a lot of lovers of the Hunger Games, huge amounts of Doctor Who, huge amounts of fans of anything by Joss Whedon. We're starting there. We could go to other things that are more tangential. You could work with any myth in order to create activation. It's different with each myth because, for instance, if we were going to be working with True Blood doesn't really have good guys and bad guys the way Harry Potter does. It's more nuanced than that. So that's a little harder, but you can still do it. But it's not like there's this huge amount of a wave of everyone who's a Harry Potter fan is a fan of True Blood. But those numbers are so key with Doctor Who. So it's harder to mobilize a smaller fandom because the Hunger Games fandom, even though it's huge, is not nearly as big and not nearly as old in terms of maturation as the Harry Potter fandom. But what we've got with the Harry Potter fandom is what Henry Jenkins oftentimes refers to as the nomadic fan. And this nomadic fan movement we're seeing now is that because we started in Harry Potter, we do have the power to go into other fandoms that are connected to the migratory patterns of Harry Potter fans, which allows things to be a lot more authentic. But this is still a challenge. We run into challenges working with Hunger Games fan sites to make sure that they feel respected and listened to, and that's not just Harry Potter fans coming into their turf. So there is a balance that we need to strike between the nomadic fans and then the fans that are tied to a particular local text. And then how do we do that when we enter stories that we're not even fans of? Well, we're going to need to this is where this is movement building rather than just one organization's work. It can't be up to one organization. That would be inauthentic. And if there's anything the internet does not like, it's inauthenticity. So that's at least the beginning of the answer. As for sports, sports is a story as far as I'm concerned. The Boston Red Sox, I live in Boston, are fighting the New York Yankees, and there's an epic battle there. What if we could have a competition in some way that is somehow logging community service hours on which city loves their sports team best? It could be a simple thing like the adopt a hydrant thing from Code for America on who's adopted the most hydrants, or it could be more complicated in terms of how many hours of community service were logged in. But the minute that the New York Yankees fans win, even if there were 50 people that participated, Boston media would go crazy, and the next year people would be fighting back through volunteering. We're not in the position to organize that yet, but we are slowly working to make that happen. So this is a slow rollout, essentially, and then the education piece is another part of that rollout.
Thanks, Andrew. Lauren, you're part of this story. What's your sort of perspective on what Andrew's had to say so far?
Yeah, well, as to sort of moving into other fandoms, I think it is really important what Andrew pointed out there at the end, that this is a movement. It's not just about our organization. Because I get that question a lot from people when they hear about the Imagine Better project or they saw our Hunger Games campaign. They're like, you know, how do you think you're going to move into all of these other fandoms? And to me, I've never really viewed it that way. I just think that we're one organization who is sort of spearheading fan activism, but it's not all on our shoulders. It's not all just us. And one thing I would say as to, you know, which fandoms should we go to, looking at Internet 2.0, things like Reddit and Tumblr are huge indications of what fandoms people are paying attention to now. That's where sort of all the young people are hanging out, and personally being on Tumblr, like I've joined a couple of fandoms that I would not have heard about otherwise, and what's happening with how strong social media is people are becoming fans of more things, but they're also becoming much more enthusiastic because they have so many resources now. You know, it's not like before the internet when you would watch a TV show once a week and maybe you had some friends who went to like your school or your work you could talk about it with. Now you're watching the TV show while you're on Twitter, while you're on Tumblr, and within 5 seconds of a funny moment on a TV show, there are GIFs and pictures all over Tumblr of what you just saw and people to talk to. And that enthusiasm of fans, in my opinion, is the fuel of fan activism. You know, that enthusiasm that, yes, people are putting it into art that they're putting up online and it's forming these communities, but a lot of times that enthusiasm is becoming so great that fans become at a dead end. They need something to do with it, and that's where fan activism comes in, and that's how I think fan activism is really going to thrive as we see all of these fandoms multiplying and growing in strength.
Thanks, Lauren. Netta?
Yeah, I'm really enjoying participating in this talk, especially because I'm currently in the midst of writing my qualifying examination, which is like a 10-day exam of writing theory and theory and theory. And all my theory is exactly about the things that we're talking about here. So it's just so great to reconnect all the theory that I've been deeply immersed into the actual people that are doing things. So this is such a pleasure. So I guess a question I would have to Andrew and Lauren, that one of the questions that I'm thinking about is sort of when we're thinking about an organization like the Harry Potter Alliance, thinking about some of its effects on the one hand, its effects on the real world. So Andrew talked about, you know, taking the message of Harry Potter Alliance and bringing it to the real world and making the real world a better place. And on the other hand, I'm thinking about the effects on members, on people who participate in the Harry Potter Alliance, especially thinking about these being generally young people, and, you know, given a lot of discourse about how and whether and to what extent young people are and are not engaged, both civically and politically today. And so, Andrew, I'm curious, and Lauren, I'm curious about your thoughts about sort of the balance between doing things in the world and sort of having Harry Potter Alliance create social change and also creating change in participants.
Well, Netta, I think the questions that you've asked and raised about that have been highly influential in my thinking, because it's made me think a lot more about the fact that we are doing something pedagogical in nature, and those questions that you've asked, and that in reading a lot of Henry's work, including work around us, which is a meta experience. By the way, when I'm reading your work, Netta, that's a meta experience. That's kind of funny. All right, Netta. That should be like your online username. So that's been a heavy influence. And then also, you know, for me personally, I'm I'm in this very weird age bracket of, marketers talk about Generation X and the millennials. I happen to be born in one of the years where it's sort of a nomadic year, and a lot of the leaders of our fandom who've innovated are born around the same exact time, being between the ages of 29 and 33. So we're sort of like the elders of the millennials. So I think that I have interesting insights into this, but I think Lauren actually has more insights into how she could be shaped by these things, because she actually is a complete and utter millennial. She's right, but and is constantly teaching me how to use social media. Even though certain people my age know how to do it instinctively, she reminds me. So, but back to this question. One of the other experiences I've had is, the Harry Potter line started off for me in front of a computer screen, and then occasionally Wizard Rock concerts. But over time, I've had the chance to get to know people in our chapters, and then also to spend a lot of time. The most transformative and personally intense experience was forming a friendship with Esther Earl, who is one of our members. And I feel as though I bring up Esther too much. I don't want to be bringing her up too much, but I think it's very pertinent in this case. Esther is one of our most loyal members, and she died in 2010 of cancer. And with Esther, I had a 2-month friendship with somebody who was absolutely spectacular and introduced me to other friends of hers who are major Harry Potter fans, who have become good friends of mine, and they're members of the organization. And I got to watch the impact that our organization has on them, and see that it's influenced the way that they think, absolutely, but even more so the Harry Potter fandom itself, as well as the Nerd Fighters and as well as the Harry Potter Alliance, all sort of coming together in this, has influenced the sense of community that people have. It's created a space for friendship to exist. That relationship that I have, that I continue to have with Esther Earl, is something that transformed me. Sometimes people don't talk about what the internet has done for young people who are sick and are stuck having to be in their homes, wanting to go out with friends, and they can't. And yet Esther had a whole world open up to her of community through the Harry Potter fandom, through the Nerd Fighters, that was unbelievable. Last week I was at VidCon, which is a conference set up by John and Hank Green, of the biggest YouTube celebrities, and I was walking and I saw a kid walk by with a Harry Potter line shirt, and I said, "Hey, nice shirt." And he said, "Thanks." And I said, "Hey," and I said hello to, and he saw my name and he goes, "Wait, no, but you're the and it's kind of one of those moments. It's funny where I get to be a celebrity for about 5 minutes. But then he brought over some of his friends from his chapter at UC Davis, and he was saying, I got to UC Davis and I didn't have any friends, but I knew of the Harry Potter Alliance, and I saw this chapter, and I became part of it, and I'm off campus. That's where I live, and all of my friends now I know through the Harry Potter Alliance. And him and this other guy, I think they're best friends, and they said we wouldn't have been friends at the Harry Potter Alliance. And I just stood there and just started crying. It's amazing to watch the ripple effect that these things have, and that at this point, another experience I had at VidCon was people were walking up to Lauren, who's one of our main video bloggers, and asking to take pictures with her. One person handed me the camera to take a picture of her and Lauren, and we're talking about her as the face of the HPA and all this stuff, and they didn't ask me to take a picture with me, and I'm not used to that. At fandom events, that's when I get to be this miniature celebrity. So what's really wonderful is watching the community come alive in ways that I have nothing to do with at this point, and watch other people become the face of the organization in ways that I don't have anything to do with. It's really fun for me to play celebrity for a little bit, but it's more fun to watch how every member of this movement is a leader of this movement, and how they're all shaping it. And that leadership is making them, suppose we have, to speak more to your question, suppose we only tap into a small percentage of the youth population. This percentage is so important because they're so engaged, and as Lauren was saying, they're so enthusiastic, and just watching it is unbelievable. Sorry for the verbose roundabout answer to your question. I feel I can go much further, but I'm really curious on what Lauren has to say about how she has felt how we've affected other members as human beings, and as well as yourself, Lauren. One last thing I'll say, though, is we do work on body image and personal empowerment stuff, and we're beginning to do that a lot with Ivana Lynch. We're going to be who plays Luna Lovegood in the movies, and we're going to be making an announcement together at the upcoming big Harry Potter conference in Chicago, LeakyCon, in August. So, Lauren, sorry to, yeah.
I wanted to ask a question, Andrew. We wanted to ask sort of two parts. How have schools and colleges sort of received HPA or engaged with you? And then also a second part of that is you've used two words that I think are really powerful in terms of motivating young people, which are engagement and authenticity. And those are two words that, in terms of education, schooling, those are hugely problematic. So what sort of lessons are there?
They're problematic in schooling because they're not authentic and they're not engaged. Is that is that the implication?
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many studies that indicate, you know, how disengaged youth are from schools and education and what have you. But the second part of the question was also what sort of has the reception been in schools and colleges to HPA?
Yeah, I mean, the first part, I mean, I would love to expound upon. It's an amazing piece of performance art to know that, you know, Pink Floyd came out with The Wall about 30 years ago, and yet the main questions we're asking about the school system at this point regarding testing and outcomes is still how can we perfect that music video where the kids get churned into meat. It is astounding to me how children are so curious and how we have this building that's like a rite of passage to learn how to not be curious anymore, to learn how to not like learning. And it's incredible how deep these conversations can go around. Are teachers' unions the problems, or is this the problem, or is that the problem? And yet no one in those questions that in questions I get into with a lot of people is, well, what about kids and the fact that they don't really like school? Has anybody talked about that? Like, and that we can change that. We have evidence of that changing. I'd say that we have, by and large, seen high schools and middle schools and colleges be very receptive to us, though, as clubs. We haven't tried to replace their education; we've built on it. So that's been very good, with a couple of exceptions of a couple of principals who, it seemed, did not like that we have a pro-LGBTQ stance, and they don't want to be controversial in their communities by including everyone in their communities. That has been an issue we've run into at least one time with one particular principal. But by and large, I would say that most schools we've seen have been fairly permissive and excited that people are getting involved in the community. Also, our chapters are so community focused. You know, they focus on our larger advocacy campaigns, but they also do food drives and the sort of things you would see with a classic Key Club type thing. That I think the fact that we marry advocacy and community service so much makes us much more difficult for schools to dislike. So we're playing a little bit of a game, and it's working.
Mimi, you had a question or a comment about the intergenerational, cross-generational aspect of HPA. You want to jump in with that?
Yeah, it kind of gets back to sort of my question about what's unique about the Harry Potter fandom. And maybe, I'm sure it's not just Harry Potter, but it's this intergenerational quality to it. So I think although the Harry Potter books were definitely aimed at younger folks, it certainly captured a lot of adult fans. And to me, I would suspect that creates a space of opportunity for activism. Definitely when we're looking at other connected learning communities, one of the key features we look for is the fact that there's intergenerational connection and there's adult leadership, there's youth leadership happening within the same community. So I'm not sure. I mean, I think there's certain fandoms that skew much more strongly youth or even are somewhat hostile to adult participation. It seems like the Harry Potter fandom is one where that intergenerational dynamic has worked pretty well. But I was curious to hear either Lauren or Andrew what you thought about that.
And I just wanted to chime in that related to that also, Lauren, we were waiting also before to hear your thoughts on the engagement question. So I'd love to also hear you talk about that.
Andrew, I think that's to you. Mimi's question about intergenerational, and then followed up by the engagement question.
Sure, and then yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear Lauren's take on this. So I do want to make sure we go to her. But yeah, it has been a very welcoming environment towards older people. A lot of the beginning of the Harry Potter fandom was shaped in large part by people from other fandoms who had grown up in other fandoms and always wanted that leadership experience of being a leader in a fandom, and came in. I mean, a lot of the conference that me and Netta are about to attend was created by a lot of these folks who come from other fandoms who are predominantly older than the average Harry Potter fan. And it's a very welcoming environment. The only area where I think I've ever seen any tension sometimes is the introduction of Wizard Rock is such a some of the older fans have not seemed to gravitate as much towards it because it has a very punk rock feel to it. I mean, that's just an honest answer I'll give. But for the most part, that intergenerational feeling is so strong, and even though Harry and the Potter set a tone in Wizard Rock of a stick it to the man kind of mentality, their whole idea is our whole idea, which is the weapon we have is love, and that comes from a quote from them. That's our mantra. That's one of the lyrics in their songs. The idea of everything being about love, and that Harry is beating Voldemort through love. It really feeds a sort of tone and tenor to a community to be about love and to be very accepting. It's very difficult to create a non-inclusive, exclusive community when you're all celebrating the power of love. It's sort of like the 60s on acid, but without the acid, because you're looking at the power. You're taking the power of love with music and literature and celebrating it in this very real world way. Which so it's very exciting in that regard. But one of the things that I think makes the Harry Potter fandom unique that I was trying to get to before about leaking news, and is really the thing to be watching right now, is that it's evolving into no longer being the Harry Potter fandom. It's evolving into being a nomadic fandom, which I don't think we've ever seen anything quite like this before, because it's so sprawling and it's so big, and yet it's so cohesive at the same exact time because of Web 2.0 and because of these conferences that these Wizard Rock bands, you know what? There's not too much innovation that I'm seeing with Wizard Rock at the moment. But now there's Time Lord Rock, which is based off of Doctor Who. There's Rocking Jay, which is based off of the Hunger Games. And it's the same musicians in a lot of respects, and the same websites that are breaking into other fandoms. So that intergenerational quality is moving into other fandoms, even if those fandoms are not as big. And then, of course, there are things like Lauren is making me aware of everything that exists in fandom. Like My Little Pony is now a big deal, and I don't think we're going to see as many 60-year-olds who are into My Little Pony as we do 60-year-olds who are conferences for Harry Potter. At the same time, if there is a conference like LeakyCon, which is emerging to be they have Lit Track, which is a whole day of YA authors, it's turning into a nomadic fandom conference. So I think that intergenerational feel can still be preserved, but the Harry Potter Alliance and other leaders in the Harry Potter fandom are going to need to make that happen in order for it to happen, to continue to talk that up. It's a really unique thing, I think you're pointing to, Mimi, about the Harry Potter fandom.
Yeah, Lauren, what is your perspective on that, the intergenerational aspect of things?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say that about 2 weeks ago, there was a My Little Pony convention called BronyCon. So it's a thing. It definitely is a thing. I think the reason Harry Potter is so intergenerational goes back to the timing of the Harry Potter fandom with Internet 2.0. I mean, I think that affects so much of why Harry Potter was the phenomenon it was. And I think what happened, I'm on the younger end. I grew up with Harry Potter. I was about the same age as Harry. Every time a book was published, I'm the same age as all the actors in the movies. But, people who are on my younger end of the generation, the Potter generation, we weren't quite old enough to be online when things like the websites and everything, Harry Potter fan sites, started cropping up. We were a little, but we definitely weren't old enough to be running them. So you really see the leaders of the fandom are around Andrew's age. They were the ones who were in college or late in high school, and they were able to be starting all of these things online. And now we've grown up and we can be a part of the online stuff as well. But when it was starting, we were just there as little kids liking the books, and then the older ones were starting the actual movement of the fandom. And I think another thing is that Harry Potter was very popular for parents reading to their kids, and all the parents became fans of it as well. I know my mom's maybe more of a Harry Potter fan than I am, to be honest.
This is sort of an obvious question, but I'll put it out to all of you as I listen to Lauren talk about and both of you talk about the Web 2.0 and the internet aspect of things. So I think I have 4 kids. I think I have 28 copies of the books. Everybody has to have their own set. But what would have happened without the internet and Web 2.0 to this energy that was created by these, by the books and the stories? How instrumental has that been? That's for anybody.
I'll go ahead and say something to that. Because right before I got into Harry Potter, I, like Andrew, was a big fan of The Wizard of Oz, and I read all 14 Oz books, and I like knew everything about the movie, and I always thought that Harry Potter was like The Wizard of Oz for our generation. And Wizard of Oz was published in 1900, but it was a huge phenomenon around the world, and I think in a lot of ways it actually does compare to Harry Potter, just the ways that there were clubs that were started. There's a Royal Club of Oz, and the movie, obviously, and there was tons of plays, and it was always they had the characters in parades in hometowns like that. So I think it still would have been a phenomenon for sure, and I think it it would have gone international, and we could have seen it definitely living on as a myth and a legend as we will for many years, and as things like Wizard of Oz have. But in terms of leading to things like fan activism and the idea of community that Andrew was talking about, sort of global community and breaking down IRL barriers for community, that definitely would not have happened, I don't think.
I would maybe say, just again, working on a little bit of the readings that I've been doing, thinking, for example, about Henry Jenkins' Textual Poachers, written in 1992, which talks about the community, particularly of Star Trek: The Next Generation fans, which is free online, and they did have a community, and they met in conventions, and fans that lived close to each other would meet and sit at each other's house writing fan fictions together, and they had fanzines which they would copy themselves and circulate to friends. So fandom, even with the aspect of the community and the creative creation, was possible. But I think that especially the move towards younger fans, again tying in the question of generation, was really facilitated by online. So, for example, in Textual Poachers, the fans that Henry talks about are mostly women, and mostly in their 30s, 40s, 50s. And with Harry Potter fans, we see young fans. We see fans in their also in their 40s, but also in their 30s, 20s, and also in their teenage years, and even 10 or 11-year-olds who go online and find that there are people that they can engage with. So I think in terms of spreading fandom to young generations, it was the online is really central in terms of just making it more accessible to more people, and also putting down, in a way, barriers, for example, of money, because going to conventions, I mean, obviously, HPA members or HP fans, Harry Potter fans that I talk to, they still love to go to LeakyCon, but even if they can't, they can still be a part of the fandom in ways that weren't possible to the same extent before online environments.
Andrew, do you have anything you wanted to add on this internet question, or we can go to something else?
Too much, but Netta and Lauren just summed up things really well. I think just the one thing I'll say is that the internet has allowed, to quote, I forget his name, but he wrote a lot about media literacy. Is it Neil Postman? Is that Neil? Change has changed. The nature of change has changed. So I think that what Lauren and Netta are saying is completely accurate. We would have seen a thriving fandom, but what fandom has changed in some respects because of the breaking down the barriers between time and space. I mean, the internet is this crazy time machine. Like, it's allowing us to talk to each other right now, face to face, even though we're nowhere close to being face to face, and to have a whole community watching us, even though we don't own a TV station. So it's really allowed for an interactive experience that is conducive to the way fandom has always been, but it's taken it.
How many countries is Dumbledore's army operating in? What's your reach?
Well, it's always a debatable question, because if we look at our network as MuggleNet, who partners with us, and the Leaky Cauldron, Leaky News, who partner with us, then we're talking about and John Green, who partners with us and puts out videos about us. If we're looking at it from a network point of view, which is how we built the organization, these Wizard rock bands. From the metrics, we're looking at just about every country in Europe, North America, countries throughout Asia, and I mean basically every country but North Korea and certain countries in Africa, but only some. If we're looking at the actual, the actual reach we have in terms of IRL, which Lauren had mentioned, which means in real life. For those who don't know, IRL means in real life. It's we have to have a term for that now. When we look at it that way, I mean, we are heaviest in the United States for sure, and then second would be the UK, and then next I would say is Australia. So a lot of English-speaking countries. We do have chapters in a couple of countries in South America and throughout Europe. There definitely are huge amounts of Harry Potter meetup-related things in Italy, throughout Europe, as I said, and then in certain areas of Asia. But predominantly, I would say the US, the UK, and Australia is when we have our heaviest reach. But it really does hit the entire globe when we look at it from the point of view of the network itself.
Another question from the live stream is, does HPA worry about the disparate nature of the issues that you're tackling? And would it make more sense to focus on a single topic like LGBT issues and rights?
All right, this is a question that I wrestle with, that I've answered. Lauren, I want to just experiment and put you on the spot. Can you try to give an answer?
Yeah, I actually saw that a minute ago, and I want to sort of relate that to Netta's earlier question about sort of the effect we've seen of the HPA, like our influence on our members, because one of the most important parts about fan activism for me is not so much doing good. I mean, obviously that's huge, but is educating young people or people who are young at heart about these issues. I like that we do so many different issues because, I mean, myself and I know most of our members wouldn't be interested, wouldn't care, might not even know about these issues at all. I mean, they're certainly not things that we learn about in school, unfortunately. We didn't have like current events classes. I never learned about genocide or LGBTQ rights or anything like that while I was in school. And I think the education part of fan activism is very, very important.
Yeah, I would chime in there with exactly. I mean, amen to that. It is a difficult thing, because a lot of nonprofits, you want to make a difference in the world, but we also want to make a difference in our members. And ultimately, we are not just a fan club for good. We are not just this creative ruse to get people involved in one issue. We are a much deeper thing than that, and we're trying to reflect authentically as to what myth is. And I mean, look at communities that are organized around a story. Most of them are religions at this point, but that's changing. But is Christianity focused on one issue? Is Judaism focused? I mean, no, of course not. But yet their members do more and in deeper ways than most value-based organizations, and that has a lot to do with the fact that story is a mirror to the human experience. I'm not equating what we do with religion, by the way, just to sort of make sure to state that. But we who love story, we are looking at a mirror to the human experience. I call it a metaphysical mirror, because when you're in a story, you're looking at a mirror to your entire experience, but you're crossing a threshold into that mirror, and you're in another character, but you're doing it with millions of other people now. And then you come back and you're different. But that's a reflection of the entire human experience, not only one aspect of the human experience, be it genocide, which is, destroying the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, or LGBTQ, which is more about a need to be socially accepted, or some of the higher places of how we socialize and form communities when we're not physically in physical despair. So we have it's both an accurate way to educate people based on myth, an authentic way to educate people based on myth, and an authentic way to build a community the way all communities have been built, based off of stories. We could have been something that would have just been for one place, and we may have made more of an impact in that one place, but that's not the only reason that we exist. We are trying to invent a new kind of activism, a new approach, a new methodology. So we're building tools, and that's what part of the point of this movement is. It's not only to make a difference somewhere else, it's to make a difference right here, which also speaks to the issue of mythology, which is that the myth is the hero's journey is, yes, they are working for the quote unquote greater good, but they're also working for their own good, their own individuation as they're moving through the process of their own story. And we need to be focused on the individual and the collective. And myth allows us to do that, where value-based organizations have a real struggle with trying to tell stories to get people connected. Just to sort of break down what I feel is a very useful framework, I look at there being 3 kinds of stories. There's probably more, but this is just one framework. There's the personal, there's the collective, and there's the mythological. Oftentimes in education, we tell the story of the collective story of the United States in American classrooms. We very rarely get into the personal lives of our students and allow them to put their personal lives into it, but we go there a little bit, and we basically ignore the mythological, which is all of the movies and books and TV shows that they're focusing on. They're actually focusing on, except to look at classic literature, which then gets segregated, which is a silly thing. So this is a very interesting question, and one that we're continuing to wrestle with. But what we are seeing is that there are some common themes in the issues we deal with, and in a lot of ways, this is watching one of the many manifestations of the feminist tradition of not only the personal as political, but the concept of intersectionality and seeing how issues connect. Yes, it might make us less effective in the short run regarding planes to Haiti or number of people we've protected in Darfur, but in the long run, an educated populace, I'm going with Jefferson here, an educated populace is one that we should continue to bet on. And an educated populace at this point understands the feminist principle of intersectionality and how the personal, the political, and the variety of political and personal issues that we're dealing with all intersect automatically and spontaneously. We're hoping to do that through the metaphysical mirror of myth. I hope that made sense and wasn't too heady.
No, it's great. We just have a few minutes left, and I wanted to give Mimi, Lauren, and Netta just sort of a last comment or observation or question. Mimi first.
Sure. I'll just say, it's hugely inspiring to see the work that you all are doing, and I'm really looking forward to continuing to learn from HPA about how to mobilize young people around things that they're passionately interested in. And, just thinking more about how HPA's model of engagement, as well as your use of networks and social media, could be a beacon for other groups trying to do similar things.
Lauren?
Yeah, I think the last thing I just want to underscore is we're not just one organization. We are helping to lead a movement, and I think that makes all of the difference when you're looking at the kinds of things we do and why we do things, and how we're framing our organization is just to lead this movement of fan activism, which is based on modern mythology, a lot of what Jenkins talks about. And it's important that we don't discount popular culture as just popular culture. Things like Harry Potter, like comic books, like movies and TV shows, that these are part of our modern mythology. Our culture is now reacting to them in the same way that they reacted to Shakespeare, to Bible stories, to Greek mythology, things like that in the past. And now we're doing that with Harry Potter, with Marvel, with all these movies that are coming out now. They're having the same effect on society that all of these past myths and legends have. They really are modern legends, and that's what we're using for this movement.
That's great. Thanks, Lauren. And Netta, you, as someone who studies and researching and theorizing on HPA, what's sort of your final word here?
Yeah, so I really feel reinvigorated. I think after this this hour to return to my to my theory and remember how it connects. But related to that, I really feel that one of the great things working with the HPA as a case study was that really this is a mutual relationship where I feel that I can study the HPA, but I can have conversations with people, and I feel like ideas are flowing from the academic realm to fans and back in ways that are really really fruitful, I think, for both sides. And I think that in a way it's a model, it's a great model for cooperation between a civic organization and an academic endeavor, which I think for me has been really great.
Thank you. So we're up at an hour. And Andrew, thank you so much for a great session and a lot of provocative remarks. And Mimi, Lauren, and Netta, the same for your help and time this morning or today, wherever you are. All of the recorded parts of this session, as well as a lot of curated content, will be up on the site later today. And we really would welcome you to go back to that and look at all the great stuff that's John Bariloni, our community manager, helps to curate these sessions. There's a lot of great links and stuff. Our next session for ConnectedLearning.tv is Thursday, July 19th at 10 a.m. Pacific time, and it'll be with Mozilla's Mark Sermon, and he'll be talking about Mozilla's Webmakers Initiative. And if this has been something you've enjoyed and being a part of today, it's been great to have you. Please share these weekly webinar sessions, links to them with your personal and peer networks, and it'd be great to have you here next week. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.